You have a glass of wine you paid too much for. You have nowhere to be for 7 days. You should feel free, but you don't. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice that sounds exactly like your mother is asking who is going to water the plants while you're gone. You already arranged for someone to water the plants. And yet, you keep thinking about it. You take a sip of your wine. You pick up the phone next to you and start typing a message to your mother preemptively, just to make sure. This is your life at every stage as an Indian daughter who wants to live up to the expectations of her mother. You planned this trip for 8 months. You saved for it. You deserve this. You knew you deserved this. And then, the week before you left, your mother asked why you needed to go alone. She didn't say don't go. She said why alone. She said it the way people say things that are not questions. You went anyway. You sat on a beautiful terrace watching the sun go down. You ordered food you had been thinking about for months. You took a photo. You started to post it. You stopped. You thought about your mother sitting in her kitchen. You put your phone down. The food was good. You were not fully there to taste it. His name does not matter. What matters is that you loved him. What matters is that for 2 years, you had an entire life that your family did not know about. A flat he had a key to. Friends who knew him by name. Birthdays celebrated together. Arguments, reconciliations, quiet Sunday mornings, a whole world. And on every video call home, you smiled and said nothing's new. You got very good at saying nothing's new. You kept two versions of your life running simultaneously. It was exhausting in a way you couldn't explain to anyone. Because explaining it would mean explaining everything. And you weren't ready. What you know is that every time he said, I love you, a small part of you flinched. Not because you didn't feel it, but because you couldn't say it back at full volume. Not while the other life was still running, not while the guilt was still sitting in the room. You found the therapist on a Tuesday. You made the appointment on a Wednesday. You cancelled it on a Thursday. You remade it on a Friday. You sat in that first session and talked for 50 minutes about everything except the thing you were actually there to talk about. She asked about your childhood. You said it was fine. You said your parents worked hard. You said they sacrificed a lot. You said you were grateful. She said those things can all be true and it can still have been hard. You looked at the wall for a moment. You said yes. You went home. You did not tell your mother. You did not tell your father. You told one friend who lives in a different city and made her promise not to tell anyone. It felt like carrying a secret, like you were doing something wrong, like going to therapy was a verdict on your family. It wasn't a verdict on your family. You know that. You knew that then. And still, you paid for 8 months of sessions in cash because you didn't want the statement going to a joint account. Just in case, it was a Thursday. You had a deadline that had already moved twice. Your dad's birthday was on the Saturday. You told yourself you would call in the morning. The morning became the afternoon. The afternoon became the evening. By the time you called, it was past midnight his time. He answered on the second ring. He sounded half asleep and completely awake at the same time. The way parents sound when their children call late. like they were waiting, like they are always waiting. You said, Happy birthday, Papa. He said, Thank you, beta. He said, Don't worry. He said, Go to sleep. You said, I'm sorry. He said, There is nothing to be sorry for. And you both knew that wasn't quite true. And neither of you said that. You said good night. He said good night. You sat with your phone in your hand for a while after. You told yourself next year would be different. You have told yourself that before. You got the email on a Monday. You read it 3 times. You sat very still at your desk. You had worked for this for 2 years. Late nights, weekends, a holiday you cut short. This was yours. You should have called immediately. You didn't call for 6 days because the promotion meant a bigger role, which meant more responsibility, which meant staying, which meant another year at least before going home, which meant the conversation you had been putting off for longer than you wanted to admit. So, you told your work friends. You went for drinks. You smiled. You were genuinely happy. And underneath the genuine happiness was a quiet calculation running about how to tell your parents in a way that didn't feel like choosing your career over them. You were not choosing your career over them. You were just living your life. But the two things felt the same from where they were standing. And you understood why. And it didn't make it easier. It started because you were busy. One day became 2 days. 2 days became a week. You texted instead. Just a voice note. She replied and said, Okay, beta. And the call that used to take an hour took 3 minutes. You felt the distance in a new way. Not the miles. You were used to the miles. The other kind. The one that accumulates like dust. You still call. But you remember the girl who called every single day. And sometimes you don't recognize her from where you are standing now. It was just a haircut. You had been thinking about it for a year. You sat in the chair and said, Do it. You walked out feeling like yourself in a way you hadn't in a while. You posted one photo. Your friend said, You look amazing. Your colleague said it suits you. 2 days later, your mother saw it on a video call. She went quiet. Not loud quiet. The other kind? She said, Oh. She said, When did you do that? She said, Your hair was so beautiful. She said it like it was past tense, like something had been lost. You said, I like it. She said, Yes, of course. She moved on to other things. But the O stayed with you. One syllable. And somehow you spent the next 3 days half regretting a haircut that had nothing to do with anyone else. That is the thing about the guilt. It doesn't need a reason. It just needs a pause, a silence, an oh, and off it goes. You don't remember what started it. That's the thing about those nights. They don't start with anything big. One small thing, a message you misread, a day that went wrong in ordinary ways, a moment of being very tired in a place very far from the people who know you best. And something just goes. You sat on your bathroom floor. You cried the kind of crying that's been waiting to happen for a while. The kind that is not about the one thing, but about all the things. The distance, the pressure, the performance of being fine, the loneliness of being capable. You cried until it stopped. You washed your face. You went back to your life. The next morning, Your mother called. She asked how you were. You said fine. You said work is busy but good. You said the weather is terrible but you're managing. She said that's good beta. She said eat properly. You said I will. You hung up. You made yourself a cup of tea. You were fine. You are always fine. That is the problem. It was nothing dramatic. You were sitting with a friend who said, do you notice you apologize before you say anything about yourself? You said, what do you mean? She said, watch. And you watched. And she was right. I know this sounds selfish, but I don't want to make a big deal of this, but I'm probably wrong. But you had been prefacing your own feelings with apologies for having them for as long as you could remember. You sat there for a moment, and something shifted, not loudly, not with a plan, just a quiet decision to start noticing. Somewhere right now, a girl is calling home. She just got back from something she almost enjoyed. She's telling her mother she's fine. She is fine. She's also a little tired of the apology she carries everywhere she goes. The one nobody asked for, the one she gives anyway. She doesn't know yet that noticing it is the first thing. Not fixing it, not explaining it, not writing it in a journal and resolving to be different. Just noticing. Just saying, oh, there it is again. And one day, slowly, doing it a little less. That's all. That's enough.